On the eastern slopes of Mount Everest, nearly 1,000 hikers and local guides found themselves trapped by a once-in-a-generation blizzard, right as China's Golden Week flooded the mountain's high valleys with trekkers. What began as a brisk holiday adventure at 4,900 meters turned overnight into a high-altitude fight to survive collapsing tents and meter-deep snow. Yet somehow every last person was rescued in an operation authorities are calling a miracle. How did a rare disaster on the world's most legendary peak push rescuers, villagers, and yak convoys to the brink? And what was it really like inside the storm? The answers lie in the night the mountain changed. Late on October 4th, the wind began to howl across Everest's eastern valleys. At 4,900 meters, what started as swirling flurries turned into a blinding wall of snow. Visibility dropped to almost nothing within an hour. Guides and trekkers scrambled as tents collapsed around them, the weight of fresh drifts crushing poles and burying gear. Snow piled up past tent windows, sealing off escape routes and trapping hundreds in scattered camps. Some groups tried to dig out with bare hands, only to find the exits blocked by chest-deep powder. By midnight, the storm's force shook the ground. Radio calls for help crackled through the static, but the blizzard drowned out voices and signals. Those caught outside rushed for cover, some crawling beneath tarps or huddling in shared shelters as the temperature plunged. Descent trails vanished under shifting snow, leaving even experienced guides disoriented. In the darkness, the mountain erased every familiar landmark. For hours, the only sounds were the wind and the collapse of fabric under the snow's relentless weight. By dawn, the storm had left a landscape of flattened camps and blocked valleys, no clear way down, and no certainty that help could reach them in time. Inside the battered camps, guides worked through the chaos, pulling trekkers from collapsed shelters and forcing everyone into the largest tents left standing. With the storm howling outside, dozens huddled together, pressed shoulder to shoulder, sharing what little warmth they could. At 4,900 meters, the thin air burned in their lungs, and the cold pressed in from every side. Some guides rationed out packets of dried noodles and sips of water, careful to keep supplies for the long hours ahead. Oxygen bottles, meant for emergencies, were pooled and passed among the weakest. In the darkness, voices whispered instructions. Stay awake, keep moving fingers and toes, wait for any sign of daylight. Snow kept rising, sealing doors and windows, cutting off even the faintest hope of escape. Outside, the wind erased footprints within seconds. For many, the only comfort was the presence of others, strangers now linked by the simple act of survival. Guides watched the clock, waiting for the first hint of dawn. When it finally came, the storm had left a silent, white wasteland. The decision was clear: gather what could be carried, follow the guides, and trust that the path down would still exist beneath the drifts. At first light, villagers and yak herders gathered at the edge of the snowbound camps. Yaks, bred for high altitude, pushed forward through drifts that reached their flanks, breaking a trench for the columns of trekkers behind. Local guides called orders over the wind, while villagers hauled oxygen canisters and sacks of food on their backs. The line moved slowly, knee-deep in powder, each step a struggle to stay upright. At the front, yak teams from nearby villages set the pace, stopping often to rest and check for hidden crevasses. The route wound down toward Kudang, where relief stations waited. As the first evacuees arrived, villagers handed out hot water and instant noodles, a simple gesture that meant survival after a night in the storm. By day's end, 580 trekkers and more than 300 local staff reached the relocation hub, exhausted, shivering, but safe. The path cleared by yaks and neighbors had become their way home. At 5 a.m., the first distress call reached Dingri County's emergency command. Local officials and Tibet emergency management teams began mobilizing before sunrise, relying on satellite phones and WeChat groups to track stranded groups through the blizzard. Helicopters, requested as soon as the storm broke, remained grounded by wind and whiteout. Rescue leaders faced a critical decision: send ground teams on foot or wait for air support that might never arrive. With communications patchy and forecasts changing by the hour, the command post authorized a mass overland push, prioritizing medical emergencies and the largest clusters of hikers. Operators weighed the risks of moving in uncertain conditions against the danger of waiting. As the evacuation unfolded, debate grew over whether trek organizers had ignored early warnings or underestimated the storm's severity. Inside the command center, every call meant a choice: how to allocate teams, when to pull back, and how to answer for decisions that would be questioned long after the last group reached safety. By Tuesday, authorities confirmed that nearly 900 hikers, guides, and yak herders had been safely evacuated from Everest's eastern valleys after the early October blizzard, an operation involving local villagers, yak teams, and coordinated regional command. This rescue stands out for its scale and success. Every person was accounted for, with no reported fatalities in Tibet, even as neighboring regions faced deadly consequences from the same storm system. However, key questions remain about why large trekking groups proceeded despite forecasted warnings, and what policy changes may follow for future holiday seasons. The full details of operator decisions and emergency communications are still under review, as Everest's scenic areas on the Tibet side remain closed for reassessment. This event highlights the critical roles of local knowledge and community in crisis response. Against rare Himalayan odds, a coordinated effort brought everyone home,